Good morning. It's half past ridiculous, and we're seeking a sentiomantium. Last week, we were talking about language and structure, and so it's such a massively huge topic. We need to keep on this. We do have a little bit of an audience today, which is nice. Welcome Jane and Jenny and Mercy and Sony and Clive. Clive is becoming a regular. Thanks everybody for coming and listening to us natter for 2 hours. Is there anything last week, Carl, that you can think of that we need to readdress or expand on?
Well, the show was pretty much on the language that's used typically against us because, as we pointed out, we're speaking English and they're speaking what's normally termed as legalese. Has two different meanings. Even in the legislation, they can even redefine words in legalese as something different just because they want to do so in a particular piece of legislation. So our discussion on language is huge. So I think what we started on last week, actually we kind of bounced around a little bit based on stuff that we were talking about. So I think anything that we kind of speak about this week, the chances are we are going to reiterate things that we mentioned last week anyway. Because language is just such a huge subject that we're going to end up touching on subjects such as the recognize, the understanding, or the comprehension is another one. Just so many, yeah. So I think we should just kind of dig straight in and let's see where we go and get people involved too. That would be good.
Well, one of the big things to remember, particularly remember, is don't be afraid to stop them in the middle of a sentence and go, what do you mean by this word? Where do you get the definition? What is your definition, and where did you derive that definition from? And it's important to ask where they got the definition from. Otherwise, they could just pull something out of their butt, and if you accept it, you accept it, and it probably is going to cause you problems. But don't ever be afraid to say, I don't comprehend that word. What are you talking about? And this sort of ties in with when they ask for the name. What name are you, who specifically you're looking for? Are you looking for the fact or the fiction? Because if they just say a name, if they just say, Bill Thompson, how many Bill Thompsons are out there? Which one are they talking about? Are they talking about the Bill Thompson standing in front of them? Are they talking about the guy down the street? Are they talking about their friend from school? I mean, you don't actually know. So again, as far as a meeting of the minds go, you need to make sure you get clarification on these things. Don't assume. This is something that I'm going to be nattering at for years. Do not assume you know what they're talking about. Because chances
especially if you receive it as a letter as well, we're talking about face-to-face confrontations with people like you and I. They're just doing their job. And as I explained not last week, I don't think it was the week before, they are trained in procedure. There's a set level of procedure that they have to go through, and in following that procedure, they then obtain the jurisdiction and also obtain evidence to file charges against you or issue tickets against you. So this is the whole process, and the language written in letters is even worse because most of those are template-based, written by lawyers in legalese form, and have been perfected over generations, realistically. So these things are really, really tricky.
Yes, I was just reading. Go ahead, John. I was just reading through a document a couple of days ago, and they were talking about, specifically the word "you," Y-O-U, and how that's used, and it came out. I don't fully understand it. I'm going to have to go over this document a number of times to get this, but they brought out the concept that the word "you" typically is plural. It doesn't define a single individual. It defines a group. And when they use this, particularly in a court, do you accept these charges, right? Well, who is you? I'm not you, so who are you speaking to, right? Don't assume they're talking to you, in regular English, to the person who's standing in front of them. Because most of the time, if it's statutory charges, they're not talking to you. They're talking to the fiction, and if you answer for it, then they assume you are the fiction, you are the liability for the fiction, and you wind up all kinds of problems. Now,
the Wikipedia, actually, if you look at it, Wikipedia defines you as a second person or a personal pronoun in modern English. And it actually came from Old English, where ye was the original, which is a closed form of it. It's a personal form of it. And you is actually an expansion of that, and is as you just defined, is a group, is a description of a group. The possessive form of it is your or yours. Then that becomes personal again. So as you pointed out, the simple word of you in a sentence, well, in legal form, has a completely different connotation. And I don't, do you have the document on the screen at the moment, John? Because I actually do have a copy of it too.
No, I don't. I wish I did.
Okay, do you want me to...
If you want to bring it up and read through it, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, hang on a sec. I could do better. I can even post it, unless you'd rather I did that separately.
No, that's fine. You can post it and we can read it, go through and you know,
okay,
get the main points at least anyway, so that people are familiar with it.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'd actually read this myself. I think I sent you the copy of it because I was actually flabbergasted. I hadn't heard this particular concept put in this way, and to be honest, it was very very eye-opening to me, probably to you as well, because I'm not sure if you'd actually seen it done this way either. No,
I was not aware of this, even through all of my my research. This is the first time I'd really come across this. It was a really big surprise. So this is good. Now I'm just going to go. People can review the form, but I'm just going to go to the bit that I found that was especially important, because it was the examples. Okay, there are several examples given. Yeah, before we actually read any of this verbatim, we should, or we'd like to give credit to www.naturalperson.ca, which is, again, if you really think about it, kind of a misnomer, but I can understand where they're coming from. So if you're looking for the document, it's on www.natural-person.ca. Thank you very much, guys. If you're listening, I hope you're not upset that we're using your document, or perhaps you're overjoyed that we're advertising for you. That's fine. Well, hopefully they're overjoyed. But yeah, so the first part of it, you may be able to understand, or you may not, depending on your level of understanding of English. But I wanted to go straight to the examples, because I think the examples explain it perfectly. And from my memory, I don't think they're wrong, because all of the stuff that I've ever seen or read, this is exactly what happens. So the first one, a judge might say, Mr. John Smith, I find you guilty. The question arises then, who is this particular you, considering that you is actually plural? But
we don't know it's plural unless you know English. So the answer may well be in the judge's next question. Mr. Smith, do you have anything to say? Notice that the judge is not properly asking if Mr. John Smith has anything to say. He's rather improperly asking John Smith if you has anything to say. Thus, whoever answers voluntarily defines himself as being in joinder with you and concurrently accepts the guilty verdict for the person, Mr. John Smith. Now, as we've discussed in previous shows, the straw man is how a lot of people know and understand this particular concept of the person, but it's we've described it as the overcoat of commerce that can be used and can be taken off. You don't actually have to be that person all of the time. But what this is saying here is that there's actually another person that the law courts are referring to. Is that what you see as well, John, going through this? Or
most definitely. The next sentence or the next section in this, something that people can actually look up, and it says, check out any court transcripts you can find. And in not one instance will you ever find an example of a judge saying, I find you, Mr. John Smith, guilty.
Yeah, and this was my understanding too, or comprehension, whichever word you want to use. Yeah. But yeah, this was because I've been through the law courts, the legal systems. I've heard these verdicts. I've read about them, and it's right. I don't ever remember a judge or magistrate or anybody referring to the name of the person in giving a judgment.
Yep.
It's always been that we, even if it's a jury, we find you guilty.
Yep.
We find you guilty.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't say we find, or even we find the defendant, because that's a separate identification as well. But
yeah, you'll find this in licensing, you'll find this in banking, debt collections, all of that stuff. They're not actually going to come out and say John A. Smith owes. It's always, this is addressed to John A. Smith, you owe. Always.
Yeah, and this is another thing that it's put further down as the examples. And this was something else I'd also seen, and I'm sure you've seen so many times dealing with, debt recovery agents and all sorts of letters out there. And this is exactly what I've seen. It's always, you owe. It's never the named person, because they can't do that.
I would absolutely love to be in the gallery when somebody says, well, I understand you to be plural, so which you are you referring to? Mm-hmm. Force the issue. Force them to reveal the game. And I think that's pretty much our goal here with this show in any respect, is to give people the tools they need to reveal the game, because once the game is revealed, once the light is shone on it, it has no power anymore, and you will as soon as they break, you will instantly see your remedy at that point. And you can probably, even the most inexperienced person, if they can get the admission that they're not dealing with flesh and blood, they're dealing with a fiction, they'll be able to walk out of this and probably not wind up having to answer for that fiction anymore. So I got to say it again. Don't assume in any of this stuff. It may seem trivial when you first look at it. Well, the word you, they're talking about me. What the hell? But you really got to look at this really, really carefully. Understand and comprehend both that the stuff you're taught in school is not going to serve you. It's going to serve them. The schooling system, the way children are taught language, the way children are taught how to write, is intended to benefit the system, not benefit the individual. So the first
because
thing,
we can't understand what's actually being said to us or written to us. And I just want to bring up an example that I brought up in several previous shows. Bill Clinton going through his deposition for what the hell do they call it? Anyway, he was going through the deposition. His sentence statement to the lawyers was, "It depends on what your definition of is."
Yep.
And everybody said, "What the hell is he talking about? Is." Well, apparently it isn't. And when you read it up, you'll understand exactly what he was talking about, and you understand that Bill Clinton knows this language.
Yeah.
He understood, comprehended, whatever word you want to use, exactly what it was that he was saying, and the change that it made in the allegation against him because he used that defense. So simply using the question, which you are you referring to? You know, you, the name, you, the plural, and you, incidentally, is you, as in the Chinese type name. And it breaks apart their presumption and assumption, one, that the word that they are using against you, you are accepting it, and you are accepting the joinder between you, the third party, and Mr. John Smith, the name, the fiction, and I don't want to say you, the being, because we're getting into it, but but there are three. You know, you are the being, you're the man, the woman, the fiction, and then you, which is a completely separate third party that apparently we knew nothing about, that operates within this legal framework.
Yeah.
But answers so many questions now as to why people ended up failing in court, because they didn't take into account, they might have not been placing joinder between themselves, the man or the woman, and the legal fiction, but they placed joinder with you, the
Yes.
third party.
Well,
and that's where they fell over.
I'm sure that there has been a number of those. I think it would be more accurate to say that those that did fall on their face in court did so because they either allowed or accepted an assumption. And as far as language goes, if you walk in and I'm going to give you an assumption, which is actually a useful one, even though I say don't assume anything, is to assume that they're speaking a completely foreign language. None of the words mean the same thing that you understand them to mean. And this points it out very, very clearly that, you know, the example with Clinton, everybody knows what is. IS is. They know what that means. Yet within legalese, that can be defined probably 10 or 12 different ways, and probably is defined 10 or 12 different ways. If you look in just about any dictionary, regular English dictionary, you'll find a simple common word has several meanings. I mean, we're already exposed to this to a slight degree, but not to the level of detail that they use in legalese. It's an excellent exercise. Go spend the $50 or $60 or whatever, however much it is, to get a copy of either Black's or Ballantyne's law dictionaries, and just start looking up random words. This is a really, really good way to get it set into your head that this is a completely different language. And if you walk into it knowing that it's a completely different language right off the bat, as soon as they make a statement, you're going to start picking that statement apart. And remain calm, take your time, think about what's being said. Think very carefully about what's being said. If you have to make them wait 2 minutes, make them wait 2 minutes. And if they complain about it, then you've got some more power you can use. You know, why are you trying to rush me? Is there something here you don't want me to see? Because it's all deception. It's all deceptive acts and practices, assumptions, and they make certain that, or they try to make certain that, if you do try to step into their arena, you're going to fall on your face. And most people do. So recognizing that, in order not to fall on your face, you tread very, very carefully. And when they make a statement like, you know, Mr. John Smith, I find you guilty. Recognize, well, what you were you talking about, right? Are you finding John Smith guilty? Are you finding this flesh and blood being speaking to you guilty? Don't be afraid of being incredibly precise with your questions. And when you do ask the questions, make sure that you ask the, you know, practice a little bit. Practice with people who get it already, so you get some feedback.
I think a simple question there as well would be to respond to the judge or whoever it may be. Please define the word "you."
Well, I mean, you know, that's another way to do it. And
yeah, of course, but it's a simple one as well. You're not asking the judge to say which defendant are they actually referring to. He's already made the judgment. Then just say, well, please define the word "you," because if it's not plural, which we know it is, then it's not you the body, it's not you the man, and it's not even you the fiction either. Because when it all comes down to it, what we're referring to here is we are second to God, the Creator, whatever form that you want to put it. Government and all of these other institutions are a creation of man. So if they want to use any of these institutions as power or authority against the man, which is typically above them, then how do they do it? Because they can't do it by force, because then that would be slavery. Slavery is not allowed. So they have to do it by trickery. They have to do it by consent. They have to do it by contract, which is why we've said pretty much everything is contract. Everything is agreement. And if we agree, then they can do what they want because we agreed. That they're not enforcing anything against us. They're tricking us. They're using deceptive practices. They're doing all these nasty things. But when it comes down to it, if we put our signature on a line, they have proof that we consented. So all of this trickery down here is to make this happen for their benefit and against us. And what we're trying to do is make sure that you guys understand / comprehend the words that are being used against you, the practices that are being used against you, and give you the resources to stand in your own power and lose the fear. Because when you comprehend what these words are that are being used against you, what's going to happen is you lose that fear.
Yeah, I mean, there's
some
a really
of it anyway.
There's a
you can't use all of it.
There's a really well. You can move the fear into excitement. You can move that adrenaline rush into motivation, and that's really useful. But there's something you brought up just triggered a thought for me, and there's a very, very good clue that everybody misses in the standard Miranda warning. You know, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. So would it not be better to simply not speak?
Yeah, there's two things there. Anything you say.
Yep.
Who's you?
Yep. You know, most people are going to miss that. But the obvious one is anything you say can and will be used against you. So even if you say, look, I didn't do anything, they're going to use that against you. They will find a way. That video that we posted, the one on YouTube, if you look it up on YouTube, it says "Don't talk to police." And the officer in the second half of that video, if you get the long version, he actually goes into that very clearly, explains it really, really well. How it doesn't matter what you say, they will find something in there to pin paper on you. And
well, actually, as a prime example, something that was a reminder to me recently, if everybody remembers the case of Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart was sent to prison. She wasn't sent to prison for insider trading or any of these other securities, Security Act offences that were supposedly alleged against her. What she was sent to prison for was for lying to the authorities. There's no such fucking offence. Yeah. But she was sent to prison for lying to the authorities. They made up an offence that she gave her consent to being punished for, and ended up in prison for that.
Yep. And it's when you really get into this stuff, I don't recommend this because this is a really slippery slope. But the judge's decision is simply an opinion. If you accept the opinion, then they'll hold it against you. If you don't accept it, they can't. It's really hard to do. Trust me, it's really hard to do. But essentially, when you really break it down, when you really dig into this, it's just an opinion. And you can tell them to get stuffed. No, I don't accept your opinion. Thank you very much. Good night. Have a nice day. You have to have all your ducks in a row and everything has to be perfect on your end. Otherwise, they're going to smack you really hard because they don't want anybody to know about this. And this is another thing. Well, if you do enter this arena and you do it in this way, you will be a target. Trust me, you will be a target. They will make an example of you if you screw up. So be aware that, yes, it's fun to throw a wrench in the works. If it's something incredibly serious, when you're looking at like 20 years in prison or something like that, if it's 20 years in prison, they're probably going to put you in prison anyway. So fill your boots, like make as big a mess as you possibly can. But it's up to the individual. What level of risk are they willing to take? And keep in mind that sacrifice is the measure of credibility. So,
and that's I agree. And obviously the biggest problem is that the way the system and society has been designed, it's all, even more so now than it ever was before, it's all fear-based. Everything is about fear. And the control system is now being put into place as a double-edged sword. At one side of it, they're saying, we will protect you, the state is your friend. And the next other half of it is the cracking down on you with the militarization of the police force and handing out tickets like confetti because they want money from you. And the whole point about what we're trying to do, again, I will repeat it, is to give you the power to be able to stand in your own power and comprehend what it is that's happening, and to be able to stand up against it to some extent.
Yeah.
But you have to fight through the fear. There is a very big fear, to the extent that I mentioned something about getting a brown letter with a government logo on it. The very fact that you got something like that, most people shit themselves. Excuse the bluntness, but what's this? I'm not expecting anything. Why is the government sending me a letter? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is.
Yeah, Clive brought up something in the chat, speaking about the 20-year potential sentence that I was speaking of before, and he says for that amount of time it would have to be a real crime, wouldn't it? No. You could have a bag of weed in your pocket, and in some places that's 20 years. For having a plant.
Yeah, three strikes you're out rule in California. You get 25 years for the third offence.
Yeah. which is like absolutely ridiculous. I mean, rapists don't get 25 years. Murderers don't get 25. They get like 5, and then if they're really good boys, they get out. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what's going on out there, and this is, you know, that's part of the reason why we're even bringing this stuff up. If we can start throwing wrenches in the works, maybe, just maybe, we can get a little more sanity in the system. And because it is right now, it is absolutely insane. It is out of control, and the people who benefit from it don't think they're touchable. They don't think they are going to be held liable in any way, shape, or form. And it's only by exposing this, every possible opportunity we can have, that we can affect any sort of change within this system. The people own it. The people own the government, theoretically. The people own the laws.
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically. Okay, now if you look at the Canadian Charter or the Canadian Acts and Statutes, they're copyrighted. They're copyrighted by the Law Society. So they are not the people's law. Because if it was the people's law, it'd be available to everybody. It would be owned by everyone. We would all be shareholders within that. I mean, we got to get folks to question. And that's the biggest thing, is don't allow the folks in control to run amok anymore. And the only way we can do that is to educate, and the only way anyone can do that is to educate themselves. Nobody's going to teach you this stuff. We're not teaching. We're simply bringing out concepts that you need to go and look at for yourself.
Yeah, you need to comprehend all of this rather than just look as a cookie cutter type templates. Yeah,
that's right.
It's because if you're going to do that, it's not going to work for you. You really need to comprehend all of this. Once there is a greater comprehension, then the light bulb goes on, and the dots are connected across many levels of functionality of how this system is held in place, how other people that actually, you know, your friends and neighbors and family that are working within this system are being used to enforce that system against you because they have no comprehension of what's really going on. So part of this education process is to tell them too, you know, if they work in the local government, don't tell them their job, ask them questions, because nobody should be threatened by being asked a question. By making an allegation, by making a statement, then that's going to raise hackles. But you ask somebody a question that they should know the answer to, that in fact you already know the answer to, but you want them to find out, is the way to go. And in doing so, you also inform and educate and train the people that are working in the system to hold that system against you.
Yep.
All we want to do is just live free, happy, productive lives without interference from any other party. That's what we all want. We all want happiness. But unfortunately, the system it's impinging on our lives daily, more so and more so, so that we can't do anything now without permission from even local government, never mind the federal government.
Yeah,
you know, you want to do some repairs to a step, you've got to go and talk to the local municipal offices to get planning permission and to get a building permit, you know, so you can rebuild a porch that might be falling down. It's ridiculous.
Well, one of my landlords years ago didn't know anything about this stuff, but he was just absolutely sick. He bought some property, and he wanted to take down some trees on the property, and it was rural property. It was the side of a mountain. 22 acres up on the side of a mountain at the very end of the road. There was nobody behind him. He had no neighbors. He started talking to people about this, and they go, well, no, you got to have permission to cut down these trees. And he went, well, fuck that. I'm not asking permission to cut down my own trees. So he crafted a notice that said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut down these trees. I'm going to sell them. Such and such, these are the trees. He drew a little map, drew a picture of the trees, took it into the city and said, here, I'm cutting down these trees. Tell me why I can't. Which is exactly what you should be doing. And basically the guy stood there with his mouth open because he's never encountered this before. Because this was, when was this? This would have been probably late 90s, maybe mid 90s. That my landlord went and cut down the trees. Nothing ever happened. They didn't charge him with anything because they couldn't. He didn't ask for permission. Rob Menard brings this up in some of his earlier videos. If you get a liquor license, if you're having a party and you get a liquor license, you are now under the law of the Liquor Control Board. If you don't, they have no jurisdiction. If you get a license for a public gathering, you are now under that jurisdiction. If you don't, it's just a party, right? And he did this. There was a business in Vancouver that he was working with who decided to have, like, I think it was not really a rave, but that sort of thing, because this is long before raves were even invented. Let me think if I can remember this story correctly. Rob, the party's going on, everything's happening, they're selling beer and they're smoking dope, and it's just an awesome day. And Rob is standing outside the door having a smoke. And cops drive up, roll down the window. What's going on here? It's a party. So do you have a permission? Do you have a permit? And Rob says, we need a, no, hang on. Let me back up a bit. Cop rolls up and says, what's going on here? Rob says, it's a celebration of life. And cop says, do you have a permit? And Rob looks at him and he says, we need permission to celebrate life. And that's the kind of thinking that we're looking at. And do you actually need permission to do what you're doing? Are you going to cause harm to another? Are you going to significantly inconvenience your neighbors? If you're going to, if that's something that's likely going to happen, like if you're going to tear down a hunk of your house and put up a great big porch or a big veranda or anything like that, yeah, it's going to be some inconvenience to your neighbors. There's going to be noise. It's there's going to be clutter and trash cans and stuff staying around. So make agreements with your neighbors beforehand. Get their permission. You don't need permission from the city. You need permission from your neighbors. And but you should inform the city. Say, this is what I'm going to do. Tell me why I can't. And they'll probably come back and say, well, you need a license. And well, why do I need permission to improve my property? What claim do you have on my property to be able to say that I'm not allowed to improve it? Know who you are. I've brought this up a number of times. If you know who you are, and you have even the general understanding or a general comprehension of how the system uses deception, you can really cause a lot of stress for these people. And the point is not to cause stress. The point is to get them to question what they're doing. And if we can get the low level,
to remove the assumptions. It's to remove the assumptions that everybody accepts as well.
Well, that too. But that is a means to an end. The removal of the assumptions creates an environment where people start to question. And if we get the low-level guys, the frontline troops, the guys in the office who the first people you talk to question what they're doing, their higher-ups are not going to have the authority that they claim to have anymore, because the frontline troops are going to be asking, once they get this, you walk in for a license, you walk in for a driver's license. Okay, just as an example. So you walk in, you look at the lady, he goes, I need a driver's license. She's going to say, why? Well, I want to drive. Okay, so who are you working for? Right? She will then ask, make sure that you are actually a driver, that you are employed in the cartage of goods. And if you go, well, no, I just, I want to get in my car and I want to go and just, I got to go to work, I got to take the kids to school, whatever. School says, well, you're not a driver. Right? So if we can get the frontline troops, if we can get the low-level guys on side so that they're thinking for themselves and not just following the script, the way to do that...
That's what helps change the system from inside the system itself.
Most definitely.
The comprehension of the people can make the change. If we expect the system to make this change, we're going to be dead and buried and gone and come back to life 3 times over before that ever happens. It ain't going to happen.
No, it's far too
not going to happen.
It's far too profitable for the people who are in control. And it's not just money profit, it's power profit. And you know, when an individual can apply limitations on others that he himself is not limited by, they are going to make sure that the others don't know how to circumvent those limits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sad. I know I'm not that way. You know, when I was supervising when I was employed and working for others and in a supervisory position, I made sure that I was under the same rules and regulations that I was intended to enforce on others. And actually, I took more liability than I put on others because that's the way I think. That's the way I am fundamentally. Not everybody is like that. There's a lot of people out there who are quite happy to live their lives and do whatever they bloody well please and make sure that nobody else can do what they want either. Just because, you know, when they go home, they're eating their dinner and they go, yeah, I've got caviar and champagne and nobody else gets this stuff. You know, I feel big, I feel large, and usually that comes from an inferiority complex. If you want to get into the psychology of it, I mean, a lot of the police, the bully part of the police, they're mentally ill. These people have serious issues that need to be addressed, and because inherently nobody wants to go and hurt another person, yet a lot of these people, I've actually seen it, they take great joy in hurting other people, and that's really, really sad. The only way we can get around that, as far as the police are concerned, is to get the ones that are really good cops, who are honest and honorable and are trying to do a good job, like Carl was before he got disillusioned and had to leave, to enforce against their buddies. That's a really hard nut to crack, because it's, you know, they're instilled, it's like the military, they're instilled with this camaraderie where their friend can do no wrong. I mean, the only real demonstration of this we see in the movies, which are not, you know, I would say they're not entirely accurate, but they're not entirely inaccurate either, where when one cop goes rogue, when one cop is corrupt, it's like everybody freaks out. I think it's the exact opposite in real life, is when one cop is really good and is trying to hold the other members accountable, then he is ostracized. He is, you know, he's the bad guy.
Living witness, John. Living witness.
Certainly, and you know, but there are good officers out there, and I've met a couple. Awesome people, beautiful people, but they're stuck in a system they don't believe they have any control over. We need to be able to give them some level of control. And the way to do that is to ask questions. If the good guy, if he doesn't want to do something to you, if he doesn't want to give you a ticket, and you are able to give him a reason to say, okay, I'm walking away, he's probably going to be really happy about it. What do you think, Carl?
I agree wholeheartedly, especially as far as the cop parts are concerned, because as you and I and others know, I spent a good number of years being a police officer back in England. So I've witnessed this, and I know there have been good cops. I've worked with them. I've enjoyed their company and enjoyed working with them. Many of them actually didn't stay in the job because once they realized what was happening, that it wasn't what they believed it to be, they left. They couldn't do the job anymore. And to be honest, the only reason I stayed on for so much longer than maybe I should have done was because I felt I was working for the benefit of my family, you know, because when all said and done, we need money. And that's what it was all about. My wife was involved in a severe car accident, so she wasn't able to work. In fact, she couldn't walk properly for a while. So while all this was going on, I'm still working in the police force. So yeah, I agree that there are good people trying to do a good job, but the system itself is now designed very much to remove the good people from the job, to make it very, very hard for them to do it.
Well,
so
there was
your suggestion about making it easier for these people to stand up within a corrupt system is surely the way to go, because we have to have people inside these corrupt organizations as well. We can't expect it to be changed from the outside completely, but the force has to come from the outside. The will of the people must prevail.
Yeah.
Because we're inherently good, as you said. I think people are generally inherently good. And all we want to do is, you know, coexist with each other. And if money is still part of the system, then we use it for what it's designed for, which is just to facilitate the transfer of goods and services. That's my view of it, you know, because we feel the concepts of value and the concepts of exchange are completely and utterly instilled within us from an early age, that to do without money is something that most people cannot grasp. They have no concept of what that would be. And the other one is if we have a system where money is just dropped like confetti, you'd have stupid people who would be going out and buying 2 Ferraris and, you know, an 8-bedroom mansion just because they had the money to do it. It's not because they needed it, it's just because they wanted it, because the system right now is designed to force people into capitalistic want, that, you know, for profit, for greed. That's what capitalism is. And everybody complains that, you know, socialism and communism are all bad. Most isms, to be honest, are bad, but that's because when all said and done, they're all controlled by an oligarchic system. Or a oh shit, I can never say that word. No, you'll say it, John. But anyway, they, you know which one I'm meaning. They have that system controlled no matter who it is. It's not true communism and it's not true socialism. It's none of those. None of the isms are really true. They're all controlled by these oligarchs who control the process. And all of them, realistically, are just experiments to see which one is the best one.
I think
to control the people and get the most wealth from the people and the most production from the people so that these guys can benefit.
Yeah, I think the word you're looking for is kleptocracy.
Yeah, that's actually probably a closer definition. Yeah, I agree.
I'm old enough.
Actually,
I'm old enough to remember Canada when it was a socialist system, and it was actually running very, very well. And this was late '60s, early '70s. And in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, it started getting sold off. I remember news stories and seeing stuff in the newspaper and that about them selling off Crown assets to corporate interests, and that's, I think, where Canada fell apart. But
well, if you know the story I told you several weeks ago, one of the main reasons why socialism, in that sense, that was apparently working in Canada, died was because Pierre Trudeau signed us all on with the IMF and the central banking system, as opposed to the Public Bank of Canada, which was functioning very well, very effectively within Canada, and had been since 1935 when it was set up. And even then, it was because I think it was Mackenzie King was the prime minister at the time. The bank cartels, which had already established their domain across many countries, wanted to do the same thing in the mid-30s in Canada. And
Clive,
Mackenzie King turned around and said no.
Yeah, Clive asks, I wonder what they had on him to make that happen. And something just came out on the internet. I don't know if it was doctored. I don't know if it's accurate. But if you look at a photograph of Justin Trudeau, who is Pierre's son, apparently, and you look at a photo of a young Fidel Castro, they're spitting images, according to what I've seen. Now I need to do a little more research on this, but Margaret was a known. She played around a lot, so maybe that's what they had on him. Was, we'll reveal that your son is not actually your son. Who knows? Just speculation.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility.
I'm not saying exactly. It's a possibility. I'm not saying it's true, but there is some information coming out that suggests that this may be a little more accurate than a lot of people think.
Well, that's how they do it. That's how they get involved with the politicians. They have something on them.
Yeah, they
as being pointed out by Robert David Steele is one of the main things. He says the CIA and these similar types of intelligence agencies, their core functionality now is to establish blackmail against the politicians and the corporate owners and so on, so that they can control them all.
Yep.
That's their main function now. It's not intelligence and saving the country. It's nothing to do with that. It's how they can control the country and the politicians to do what the oligarchs, the controllers, the whatever you want to call them, whatever their desire is, the intelligence agencies help carry it out, because the intelligence agencies work for them. They don't work for the government or the country as a whole, or the people of the country.
Yeah, which brings me to...
Sorry, I was just wanting to finish
go ahead,
the banking thing. I know, try and remember, John. But the banking story was, the socialism aspects of things was working, because the Public Bank of Canada basically gave money, loaned money to the federal, the provincial, and to a lesser extent municipal governments for their functionality. It came from the central bank, the public bank, and it was spent into the economy, and through taxation, through the consumer's spending, went back into the bank system. It was a closed loop system, and there was very, very little interest that was ever charged on this money. So it never really increased or decreased. If it took $19 billion to run Canada, then it stayed at $19 billion until they wanted to spend more. And then they built the infrastructure. They funded themselves through World War II. They built the Transnational Railroad and Canada road system, St. Lawrence Seaway, all this stuff that would have cost millions and millions of dollars, which would be equivalent to billions and billions in today's notes, was done under this system, and they pretty much kept at a level of $19 billion. It's only when everything was changed over to the central bank that went to shit, because at that point everything was interest-based, debt-based, as opposed to a function of money just to allow the exchange of goods and services, which was the function of money in Canada during that period. After 1974, it became a function of control and transfer of wealth from the central bankers, the people who owned the money system. And because every country in the world pretty much has that system in place, that's all everybody knows. Not right, but that's also a function of how we're controlled and how we are enslaved. One of the main controls, as well as the language and the deceptive practices that take place, that we're also discussing and trying to inform you guys about.
Yeah.
So, having said that, John, carry on. Sorry, go ahead if you still remember your train.
Yeah, just to go back a little bit about how the blackmail works. if you are a politician or know a politician, or if you're listening to this and this is something that's happening to you, now I'm quite certain that eventually, probably not right now, but eventually this is going to get to the ears of someone who this is happening to. Expose it. Bring it out yourself. Fess up. If you do it yourself, the fallout is going to be significantly less than if it's brought out against you. Because if it's brought out against you, it's going to be full of lies, it's going to be full of innuendo and public opinion crap. If you fess up and say, look, I screwed up. You know, I'm human, I caused problems, this was, you know, set up for me. Expose it. Don't fear it. Expose it. If they're threatening to kill your kids, if they're threatening to kill your family, understand that it's only this experience that's going away. They're not actually dead. Their energy will not go anywhere. Don't let these people have this power, please. I mean,
sorry, John, on a note to that as well, Robert David Steele and what the hell's her name? She's an ex-senator from the US.
Is that Anna Von Rees?
Anyway. No, she was she's an actual senator, coloured senator.
Oh, okay.
I just can't remember her name. Somebody may pop it in the chat if they remember. But yeah, she's the two of them, Robert David Steele and this female coloured senator, have gotten together. And it's Robert David Steele's idea, but it's called Unrig, and his idea. Or ideas, and you can look up the Unrig thing for Robert David Steele and you'll be able to tell exactly what it is. But his idea as part of this whole process is exactly what you've just mentioned there, in that it's better if the people who are being blackmailed come forward. And he has a little phrase that he uses that again escapes me, but if the people that are being blackmailed themselves can come forward, then he has said exactly the same thing that you did. It takes the sting, it takes the bite, takes the power out of it, because you've revealed it. And the idea is then to reveal who is responsible for doing this, for doing the blackmail, and then take them out. What's
the main argument or the main complaint that people have against all politicians?
Crooked, most of them.
They're crooked. They're liars. They're corrupt. If we had these people come out and be honest for a change, like brutally honest, even to the point where they are risking their careers, would that not go far in public opinion? You know, finally we got an honest, you know, yeah, he screwed up, but he's honest. He told us about it, you know. And he's not hiding anything.
I think that would, for a politician to actually come out and say that, I mean it, because of course we're all very jaded now, to the extent that, you know, we don't even believe that Donald Trump is really Donald Trump, and it was just another trick. It's bizarre, but yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly that to have some real truth and honesty, and somebody who is acting in the best interests of the people and not himself and the oligarchy that controls everything, would be an absolute refreshment for everybody.
Yeah, Sony brought the name up, Cynthia McKinney. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that was it. I said thank you, yes.
Okay.
Just acknowledge Sony. Yes, thank you. It was Cynthia McKinney. Yeah, that was the name of the senator I was looking for. And Clive has posted, I think, the Unrig system with Robert David Steele.
Yeah,
and there's the manifesto.
Unrigthesystem.org is the website. And if these, go have a look at it. If it rings true to you, then I would strongly suggest you support these people, because if we can get even 20% of the politicians out there, the people who are supposedly in power, to actually fess up, to actually be honest, the system is gone. It can't survive that. So, any of these people, I would wholeheartedly support any of these people who are willing to put their entire career, their lives on the line to expose, to bring out the truth. It doesn't matter who they are. I don't care who they are. I care what they do, and I've been that way forever. I don't care about the color of your skin. I don't care about what you did in the past. I care about what you do now. And once we can get at least even a few of these people, it would be awesome if any of you folks that are listening to any of this, if you get copies or archives or any of this, contact us. We'll bring you on. You can expose it on the show. You can even do so anonymously if you want, but we want truth. We want the facts. We want no obfuscation, no deception. If we're incorrect, correct us, because we're looking to learn as well. And bring it out, expose this stuff so that people can start to heal. We have to heal this system because it is unsustainable and it will kill the planet.
Oh, definitely. I think they're talking dates of September when the Congress and the Senate come back into session. Because I think it's also the next step of the funding, the budget that they've held off again for another 6 months. But they keep mentioning that it's going to collapse, it's going to die, and so another date that they're given is September, when this whole financial thing falls around our ears. And of course, if that does happen, there's going to be chaos and a lot of hassle. But Robert David Steele there, I put a link into his website, and Cynthia McKinney have put this manifesto out there that specifically was sent to Donald Trump, but it was also to make this summer a summer of civil disobedience in some respects, and to use the criteria of this manifesto to approach every single sitting member of Congress and senator and point this manifesto out to them, and also get them to sign, what do they think? It was like a voter's pledge or a voting system renewal. Again, my memory for the actual terms escapes me. But in essence, what he wants to do is get the sitting congressmen and women and senators to openly admit that they have been blackmailed, point out who the blackmailers are, because he's pretty sure that there must be a good 70, maybe 80% of them are in that position, especially the long-term members that have been there, the career politicians now. The other aspect is to get them to sign on to the change in the voting system. And then what was the last one? No, anyway, it doesn't come to mind just now, but obviously if you go to the website and you look at the manifesto itself, the UNRIG manifesto, it's all there, and it's aimed obviously specifically at the United States. So any of the people that listen to the show and are in the chat right now, you pass that information out there, you get that through to your congressmen, your senators, mail bomb them, email bomb them, do whatever that needs to be done to get that information to them.
Yeah, I mean, 50,000 emails a day, 20,000 phone calls a day, they will take notice. The link here for robertdavidsteels.com website, I really like his tagline. And his tagline says, "The truth at any cost lowers all other costs." And that is absolutely correct. But you also brought up a term that I don't really appreciate, I can't say appreciate, I don't really agree with, and that is civil disobedience, because that assumes that you're doing something wrong. The connotations are kind of onerous. I understand. I get your point. Simply because of the way the English language, but it's something that we have to do in a non-violent way. It's basically what we are
are saying people should be doing. They stand up for themselves, but by doing so, they're being they're questioning the system.
The connotations of civil disobedience are no different than, you know, people would see that no different as children rebelling against their parents. And although, yes, that happens and it's part of growth, I prefer to look at it in an empowering frame of mind, where you're taking back your power, you're taking back your ability to choose and make your own decisions and live correctly. And by living correctly, I mean...
So I think we should find a phrase then that we both agree on, because civil disobedience to some extent...
Oh, it's accurate.
Is a definition, it's a term. Yeah, it is, but it has that negative connotation. Same as anarchy. Anarchy is not what, you know, we're all led to believe with the current form of mainstream media bullshit that's sprouted.
Anarchy is not lawlessness. Anarchy is governing yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not.
But that's not what we're told. It's not what the mainstream media say. And it's the same with civil disobedience. I think it's being used in the wrong way by the mainstream media and has that negative connotation to it. But in essence, you know, standing up in your own power and questioning the authorities, whoever it might be at whatever level, is the same thing. It amounts to the same thing. It's just done in a different way. You know, we're not throwing Molotov cocktails and what have you. You're just simply questioning the system. And it becomes a disobedience because you're asking the question instead of saying, you know, the old phrase, I'm the boss. When I snap my fingers and say jump, you say how high. Oh, that's what they're expecting. Yeah. And that's what they're expecting from us. But instead, what we're saying is when the boss snaps his fingers and says jump, instead of asking the question how high, we say why.
Yep.
Still civil disobedience, but has a different effect and a different connotation, you know? So... I mean, but you have to have the fearlessness to be able to say why instead of saying, "Oh shit."
Yeah, I mean, it's come out a number of times, and that is not to seek conflict, and that's one thing that the concept of civil disobedience actually creates is a lot of people, not all, certainly. But a lot of people would see civil disobedience as fuck you, I'm not doing that, you're an asshole, where that's going to cause more issues. That's actually going to play into the controller's hands, because then they can bring out martial law and more regulations and all of this garbage that we're trying to avoid.
Well, protest is something that I've always said is an absolute waste of time, and obviously if you just is the prime example. You do stupid stuff like protesting in the streets, they get the agent provocateurs to come in there, there's whole hell breaks loose, and the next thing you know, you're in a box because that's your assigned protest area now, because we can't afford to let you out and destroy buildings and businesses downtown. That's what it's turned into now.
Yeah, really consider this concept. Like, seriously, think about it for a while and really consider this concept. Children complain, adults claim. Think about how that would work in your life. If instead of complaining about something, instead of protesting about something, you simply claimed what's yours. How would that change the landscape?
And be reasonable in those claims too. Not like, as we've pointed out in the past, somebody claiming stupid, like I claim the moon.
Well, I mean, like the one lady, again, who I won't name because I like her and she's done a tremendous amount, but her fees, her claim for fees were in the billions of dollars, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it made her a laughingstock at that time. And it really didn't accomplish anything. Now, if that was a reasonable claim, you know, a couple of $100,000, maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million, depending upon the severity of the situation, there would have been a lot more benefit derived from that claim. So, you know, you can't claim the right to damage children. You can't claim the right to your neighbor's property. Okay, these are really obvious ones.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what you're claiming. Do you actually own it? Is it yours to claim? Is it something that has been taken away from you? Claiming the right to travel is an absolutely valid claim because you have the right to travel. At this point, it's been taken away from you. It's called criminal trespass, and they have done it by your consent, by your ignorance, and I use that term not in the negative connotation, but in the term of uneducated, and by people's unwillingness to question. That's how they get away with this stuff. That's how they can create these new laws. The garbage.
Yeah, it's always been done, so that's the way we should do it from now on.
Yeah, everybody knows. Our
parents did it. Our grandparents did it. Everybody knows. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but everybody doesn't know. They just assume.
The garbage that happened down in the States after 9/11, nobody questioned it. They ate the party line, and it's terrorist. It's the guys over in the Middle East. It's all horrible. Yeah. We need all these rules and regulations, and yeah, we're willing to give up all of our rights and freedoms so that we can live free. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Jefferson who said, "Anyone willing to give up liberty for security deserves neither." And that's true.
I think it was Franklin, wasn't it? Benjamin Franklin.
It could very well have been. I got so many of these in my head. I can't. It's all jumbled.
Yeah. No, I know.
I mean,
but yeah, you're right. That's exactly the situation. And something that was said, 200 years ago by a man who lived 200 years ago says a lot about the thought processes of the controlling and the controllers of the time, and they still exist now. Mm-hmm. It's still around now. They just have a better handle on it and a less educated populace, and that's not necessarily a dig at the populace. That's an unfortunate result of the public education system, which isn't an education system, it's an indoctrination system to allow those very same people to work and be employed, because that's the aim. They want you to be employed in production so that they get all the wealth, they get all of the property, and they get all the rewards, and you just get a little bit of compensation, and they call it wages.
Yeah, be a good little drone and accept your lot in life, and we can't do that anymore. It's not going to work anymore, and we know that. We can see it. We can see it the way society is falling down. We can see it by how many cell phone drones there are out there. I mean, zombies, just people walking around totally oblivious, staring at their phone. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's everywhere. It doesn't matter what aspect you look at. You will see this imposed control system. And by having that imposed control system in place, they can also impose the system of lack, so that you will never have enough. Doesn't matter how hard you work, it doesn't matter how many hours you work, you're still going to be behind, always. And
well, that's why it takes two, male and female, mother and father, to work to actually maintain a household, where the father, or well, typically it was the father, single wage earner was more than enough, even as as little as 40, 50, 60 years ago. It was certainly sufficient.
Oh yeah.
Now it isn't.
And if you're questioning this, if you think, oh yeah, well, that's not really actually happening, look at what's going on in the States, where you can't collect rainwater, you can't grow a garden, you can't go off the grid. I mean, they are trying to criminally charge people who don't want electricity, who want to generate their own, who want to live simply and not be attached to this leviathan that's sucking the life out of them.
Yeah, well, they've gotten to the state now where they're doing this to individuals. They previously did it to communities, and I know this one might have some bad memories for a lot of people, but I think Waco was a prime example of that. That was a thriving community that was making headway in the area, and they stamped down on that, came out with all of the child abuse stories, which I to be honest, I don't really believe that was taking place, but it was a very good reason for them to go in and, oh, we've got to help the children. And the next thing we know, the whole place is razed to the ground, and well, God knows how many people died. But that was it. That's the end of that community. And it was done in such a way that no other communities that were gaining ground either were going to poke their head up above ground, because the government was going to come along with the ATF and smash it right down below ground again.
Well, that's what they were doing with the Bundys.
Yeah, same thing.
There was some evidence. I don't know if it's accurate, but there was some evidence brought out that the Bundy Ranch, or at least a large portion of it, is sitting on a very, very rich uranium deposit. Now, is that part of it? I mean, it's got to be more than just, you know, these people are bucking the system and we're going to make an example of them. There has to be more to it than that. It's gone on too long, and it's been far too ridiculous. That
I think bucking the system is enough of a reason, because they're making, I didn't mean to cut in on you guys, but they're making an example. So if people follow that example, that gives more people living outside of their jurisdiction.
The only problem is that I know exactly what you mean. The only problem is it backfired big time. People are so pissed. Don't get me wrong.
There are some places, like you think that the U.S. hasn't gone into Syria and Libya and Saudi Arabia for reasons. Like, they tell us that it's all about terrorism. No, it's not. It's about freestanding banks. It's about so much more. So, I mean, I think in some cases you're absolutely right with what you're saying. I don't know about here in the U.S. when we're starting to, you know, you got places like Waco where they walked into and just annihilated it, which is terrible. There was nothing, just because those people had guns. That made no sense to me. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you, Burma.
You're welcome. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. This is exactly why we're doing this like this. It's just so that we can get other opinions. We can get people coming in asking questions. That's what we want. So,
I mean, I live in Pennsylvania. I grow a garden. We have gardens all over the place in the state, or at least where I'm from. They haven't really started cracking down on that. And if they did, I'd tell them to go pound sand. Let's just put it that way, because I definitely like the F word, and I would tell them to go F off. But yeah, I mean, like, just like I have a permit to carry. You're not taking my gun away from me. I'm sorry. The day that they start doing that is the day that we really need to worry.
Yeah,
especially in this country.
If you look at it from a logical perspective, if someone comes to you and says, you can't grow a garden, well, is that person not taking the liability of ensuring you have food to eat?
Well, yeah, and it's also about them wanting for us to rely on them so they can control everything.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
We know the reasons behind it. The idea, Burma, is that what we need to do is get them to question what it is that they're actually doing, because they come down with an instruction from on high, and most of these people are ignorant of the job that they're actually doing. And yeah, you can turn around and go and tell them to go fuck off and get off my land, but then they're going to come back with their buddies and their friends, and they're going to feel slighted. So, you know, the idea that John and I are promoting, let's say, is you get them to question what it is that they're actually doing. And you can say, well, okay, you're coming down here and you're telling me I can't grow a garden, which means that you're telling me, the human man or woman what to do, which means or implies ownership, which then must mean you think I'm a slave. Do you think I'm a slave?
Yeah,
and if, of course, the answer is no, they must say that. They can't say yes, they must say no. In which case you say, thank you, I'm not a slave. I will continue to do what I do for my own benefit. Please leave my property and don't come back.
Yeah. I had a concept.
No,
I had an idea.
Right.
I'd like to bring this up real quick because this is a tool we can use. I had an idea. There's a lot of people out there. Pretty much everybody's got a smartphone now, either Android or an iPhone. If there's a developer who's listening to this, what would really be useful, what could really make a difference, would be an emergency app, something that you could have on your phone, that all your neighbors would have on their phone, and it would be a contact list localized to within, I'd say, 10 miles. And if something happened, if they showed up with the black SUVs and the guys in suits and a bunch of guys with shovels coming in to take out your garden, you push a button on your iPhone, it phones everybody in the area, and all of a sudden you've got 500 people standing in your driveway going, no, you're not going to do this. That would be an incredibly useful tool for the people to use, to network, to regain their power, to empower the people once again, to not take the crap from the people who think they are in charge.
Yeah, that's what's actually happening in Ireland and in UK, actually, to a large extent. And the good thing about that is because it's mainly a small area. Ireland is not really very big, and neither is England and parts of it. It's pretty small. So communities are very close to each other. People who are connected are very close to each other. You can have a look at, it's on YouTube, there's a man and a woman, they're man and wife, Tom and Sue. I just forget their surname now. They actually ended up being turfed out of their house. We've talked about this. They'd been paying a mortgage for so long. They'd paid their mortgage. They'd gone on something where it was interest only, and they ended up being turfed out of the house, even though they'd paid for it.
Oh, people have been foreclosed on that never had mortgages.
Oh, yeah, I know and agree. But when this particular case, it got such notoriety in England, and it got around the groups, that there were hundreds of people that turned up on the doorstep when the bailiffs were due to come down. And in fact, they didn't show. They must have come down, seen the number of people around there and said, excuse the French, but fuck that, I'm out of here. And they didn't come back for a little while. But of course, they do come back, and eventually went through the whole court system, went through the whole process, and I think they were forced out.
Yep. But, if you're going to do this, this is very important. If you're going to do this, if you're going to go around and get to know your neighbors, which is awesome, like, do so. Develop an organization in your local area, and doesn't have to be the whole town. It may just be your district in the town. That's fine. It could be just half a dozen of your neighbors. It doesn't matter. But the more the better, most definitely. I mean, if you can get 500 people walking down the street going, no, it will affect change, most definitely.
Yeah.
But when this happens, avoid conflict. This is one of the primary precepts of the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers, which is an organization that Rob Menard got started. And they do not wade in and break up fights and stick themselves in harm's way. They simply expose it. They film it. Cameras. Everybody's got a camera. I've got probably 9 cameras. And I'm a little obsessive, but pretty much everybody who's got a phone has a camera. And if you can only get 15 people, if you can only get 15 people to show up for one of these occurrences, film it, put it on YouTube, expose it. Bring it out so everybody can see it. And if they try to take your phone away, always remember, it's evidence. If they try to take your phone, you can't film this. I'm collecting evidence. Because they cannot tamper with evidence. The police, the officials, they know this. And unless you use that word, they are going to assume that you're just filming, so what? But if you are collecting evidence, you have a tremendous amount of power.
Yeah, that's one of the things that where people used to make mistakes, where the police officers, especially in the States, were going against this and taking people's phones. And of course, God bless them, but the people in the United States, unfortunately, they seem to say, I have a right for everything, and the Constitution guarantees me this right and that right, and that's all they have. That's all they say. I have a right to do this. Well, not if the cop says you don't, unless you can point out a reason that he cannot interfere, because under the rules and the procedures that he is operating under as a police officer, he must follow those rules. So if you, as John just suggested there, said, I am gathering evidence, then that is part of the rules and the processes that he understands. And if you bring that subject up and he still takes it from you, then you have a valid right to go to his supervisor and say, he interfered with my evidence gathering process.
That's right. And
that's a greater offense for him than if he just took your phone because he felt like it and you didn't have a reason why other than it was a phone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great idea. But to be quite honest, like I hate when people say about in the U.S. here, they say people about the Constitution, because we like the Constitution this and the Constitution that, and the Constitution gives me rights. Actually, why are you believing that you need the Constitution to give your sovereign person the right that you should already have as a person?
Well, that's
you get what I'm saying. We don't need a constitution.
That's a huge that's a huge mistake that pretty much everybody makes. The Constitution isn't for the people. The Constitution is the limits of power of government. That's all. If you bring up the Constitution and you say the Constitution gives me rights, you're lying. It doesn't give you rights. It only limits the government from taking away your claimed rights. That's all it does.
Yeah, when it says we the people, the legalese thing, when it says we the people, it actually meant the signatories to that document.
That's right.
I think there were 12, wasn't there? So it was referring to those 12 people, not to the people of the country. And that's where they make the mistake. Even the Constitution of Canada is not a protection for the people of Canada. It is there, same as the Constitution in the US, to limit government, and it actually is solely it's to act on the government and their agents. Now, it's not quite so plain and clear, I'm not so sure, in the US Constitution, but I know Section 32 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms says it right there. Section 32, that this act applies to government and agents of government, etc., etc.
Carl, I need to question you on this, because I went to the link that you sent and I looked at it and I couldn't find that. So I know it's there. I know it's there, but I don't know that it's Section 32. We need to actually find that.
I thought it was right there. I thought it was right there on that link that I sent you, Section 32.
Well, let me go back in the chat here and see if I can bring it back up again.
Oh, you might have to go back a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right, because, you know, we have looked at that. You're aware it's there, and I'm pretty sure it was under Section 32, and I thought I'd found it on that link. We went straight to it. But yeah, I mean, everybody has the inherent rights, and we look at those rights as the golden rules. We don't look at anything specific. We simply say, you know, I have the right not to harm anybody else, not to cause any loss or damage. And loss, obviously, is in more than ways than just stealing from them, and damage, and also another expansive word, anything to do with their property. And their property is an expansive word too. So there's a bit of an understanding we have to go through when we look at that. But the last part of it is not be fraudulent in any of our contracts and agreements. And, you know, that's a simple one. If I say, well, I'm going to cut the grass of your lawn and you're going to pay me, I don't know, $40 for the exchange, and I don't do a good job and you don't pay me, you know, I mean, this is when it gets stupid. You know, be honourable. I said I'm going to cut your lawn, so do it properly. You said you'll pay me $40, so pay me $40. This is the way we should interact with each other. This is the way we need to live. Not find ways of getting out of the contract because, well, I don't feel like paying you, or, you know, any of the reasons. This is everything that we talk about is about being honourable, about being a better human being, a better man, a better woman, and not having to stoop to the levels that this system is making us go to survive. We shouldn't be surviving. We should be thriving. We should be helping each other in small communities, if that's what it takes to start off with, but then teach people, educate people how to live a better way. Even businesses, how to exist as a better business. And unfortunately, the businesses are stuck because they signed on with the process of employees, of registering their business. Once you do any of that, you give away, the registration gives away title to your business. It's no longer your business. It belongs to the government, it belongs to the state. And you then are required to follow its rules and regulations.
Yep.
Which means that you have to pay CP and file taxes, and your employees must also follow the same rules. Sorry, go on, John.
Okay, the actual document is called the Constitution Act. And Section 32, application of the Charter. This Charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada in respects to all matters within the authority of Parliament, including all matters relating to the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territories, and to the Legislature and Government of each province in respect to all matters within the authority of the Legislature of each province. So, you know, that says that the Act is for the governments only, doesn't deal with the people.
Yeah.
But the one I was looking for was the clause that states that the acts and statutes of government apply to government only. And I know it's there. I've seen it, but I can't remember where it was.
Oh, you're referring to the criminal code? Is that what you... or an expansion of the criminal code?
I'm not sure.
Wouldn't that be funny if in all those documents in the Canada and the US and the UK and all these places, if people actually like sat down and read all that stuff, which is a lot, and it reads like stereo instructions, right? But if it states in all that it's for government only, but yet all the people follow all these laws that aren't even really applied to us, you know what I mean? Wouldn't that be just like a kick in the ass?
Well, don't
forget, Burma, that what they've done, right? They've got deceptive practices that now, because we signed, we accepted or applied for a social insurance number or social security number in the case of the US. At that point, you became an employee of the government.
I understand.
You are now subject to those rules and codes and regulations.
But
you didn't realize that was happening.
I didn't do it. My parents did it, and their parents did it to them. Like they were not informed. So how is it that we still fall under their statutes of limitation, whatever, their rules and regulations? When I was a baby, when that shit went down, if I could have made the informed decision.
Did you apply? Did you actually apply for the social security number?
I didn't apply for anything. All that was already given to you prior to you even being of 18 years old. Yeah, it's all done right away.
Okay. Well, in the case of
until you like your credit cards and stuff like that, like your credit cards, your license, of course, all that stuff comes later. But but your license and your Social Security card and your birth certificate are handed to you at birth. Nowadays, they're trying to do this in the U.S. They are trying to say that if you don't have two parents on your birth certificate, it's not valid. You're an illegal alien. If you didn't get, like, they're starting to give me a problem. I was born on a military base, and I have it's a government stamp on my birth certificate, right? It's from the military. It's actually government issued. It's better than state issued, right? But I went to change my license, and they started giving me a problem about that birth certificate. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've used this my whole life. Why now is there an issue? Go up to another DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, to get my license changed over, and they took it with no problem. But like I was just saying about that, in the U.S. here, we enter into that we're babies. We're not even aware.
I agree with you. What's happened is that later on as an adult, and John will agree with me, later on as an adult, we end up contracting and making agreements. We register our business. Like you say, we apply for a driving license. Yep. There are lots of things where we interact with the government, with the state, and we make contracts at that point, which then leaves us open to the elements of their agreements, of their regulations. We don't like it. I understand what's happened, but that's what's happening.
Because we're not, and I agree with you. I absolutely agree. That's exactly what's happening. I just mean, like, that is not, I don't know. You know, I always say this, what makes their pants any better than mine? What makes them, you love to resolve all this, these issues and stuff like that, and with the governments and the way that they're running people peacefully. Right,
Burma.
But go ahead.
On that military birth certificate, is there any limiting clauses? For example, on the older UK birth certificate, it says not for identification purposes. On the birth certificate that I was given by my mother, on the back of it said revenue receipt, treasury use only. Is there any limiting clauses, any limiting phrases on that birth certificate?
I'm going to have to take a look. It's in the safe right now, and I can't get into the safe right now.
Okay.
But I will look. And I'll let you guys know. I definitely know that it did not say anything about it not being used for identification purposes, because if that was on there, there's no way schools would take that. Or, when I was a young girl and we would switch schools and she would have to take my birth certificate in and prove who I was and blah, 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 and that she was my mother, and you know how that goes.
It doesn't work that way, Burma, though, because in the UK, that certainly has been on pretty much every birth certificate. And the first thing that all of these government agencies ask for is the birth certificate. And what do? We provide the birth certificate. We then get a driving license based on that birth certificate. We get enrolled into school based on that birth certificate. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Yet it says on the back of it, not for identification purposes. What the hell are we doing?
That's interesting. It's like when I found out about the straw man and found out about how, and the guy's like, on the YouTube, he's like, if you don't believe me, go and look at all your documentation. It's all in capital letters.
Yep.
I thought that's really weird. That's not how I write my name.
But don't necessarily believe that one, Burma, for the simple reason.
Well,
the name itself. It got you on the path, yeah. But the name itself is what's important, not how it's written.
Yeah,
because they have mixed case too.
Yeah, another thing to look for.
What I mean is that that's a different entity than I am, right? You know what I mean? They look at me like a corporation. I'm not a corporation. I'm a sovereign human being.
That's right. Another thing to look for. Another thing to look for, Burma, when you look at that document, if it happens to be a copy of the original or the original, look at where your parents put their names. In Canada, it's not mother and father; it's informant.
Oh no, I'm pretty sure that mine does say mother and father on it.
Okay.
I wish I could get. Hold on. Well, give me just a couple of minutes. Let me go and see if. I'm gonna go get it. I'm gonna go ask to grab it because it's in the safe. And
that's fine. If you can get a hold of it and you're willing to do so, certainly sanitize it so that there's no personal information that are showing. But we would like to see the verbiage of the document itself.
Oh, I don't mind as long as nobody's going to try to turn around and use it for.
Well, I don't have
anything anybody can steal anyway. To be quite honest,
I mean, it's trust me. You want to sanitize it. So get some stick or post-it notes and just cut the sticky part off and put the stickers over your names and over the names and numbers. At least take out some of the numbers so that because there are unscrupulous people out there who know how to use those things. But I am interested.
Give me 2 minutes.
I'm interested in the actual form itself.
I'm gonna go down and get it. So I'm gonna have to take my headset off. So I'll be right back. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. So you guys go ahead and
we'll be here.
Talking.
Yeah, we got 20 minutes left.
You'll be there. You're not gonna go anywhere. Oh,
I'll be here. I'll be here all day. Try the video.
Okay, I'll be right back. All right, bye.
Mia. Robert, there's a lot of these people that are associated with others who have wound up being relatively unsavory people, and that doesn't necessarily invalidate their information. It should make you a little more careful with the information, but any good lie is 90% truth. So, be aware. And don't simply accept what they're saying, but look at what they're saying as this is probably mostly truth, and do your own research.
Yeah, I think typically you'll find that anybody that's reviewing good information and even because Robert David Steele and Cynthia McKinney are actually trying to get the population of the US to stand up and make their congressmen and senators do the job that the people believe that they should be doing, not the ones that they're actually doing, which is just working for themselves and the oligarchy. And if people come out and do that kind of stuff, it's funny how this information suddenly appears that belittles and drags these people through the mud. He's admitted he's been a CIA officer for a number of years. He's been involved in lots of different things. He's come out openly and stated that, but his aim is to reconciliation was the word that he was using. He knows that most of the senators and congressmen either have been or are being blackmailed. He wants them to come out and openly admit that and say, okay, I'm a sitting congressman. I'm being blackmailed so that I will support things that I don't really support. Here are the people that are responsible for doing it. He wants them to go ahead and do that. He wants the people to force that to happen. So, of course, these people that are doing it are going to do everything that they possibly can to discredit him. So, don't necessarily believe what people are saying. Look at the man, listen to his message. In your heart, in your inner soul, is what he is saying right and truth from your viewpoint? If it's not, then walk the other way.
Yeah.
If it is, then help, because that's what we all need. We need this stuff to get out, and we need to help each other. And I use an analogy. I felt many times in the past that this battle was like the trenches, and we're all huddled down in the trenches, and then I decide I'm going to jump up, I want to charge, I want to do my shit, and like run up the ladders and yay, come on everybody, come on, waving my arms, I got my gun going, and I look back and there's no fucker there. That's the worst feeling in the world.
Oh yeah,
it really is.
Oh yeah.
And Robert David Steele is probably doing the same thing right now. He's out of the trenches, he's running, and he's shouting for everybody, come on, come on, come on, and he's looking behind, and he's hoping somebody's there to support him. And that, unfortunately, doesn't happen enough. And that's why I get frustrated about this, and why I like the idea that we support somebody else who's doing this, as I hope they would support us. Because we're not doing anything that, well, it's dangerous to the system, but we're not doing anything that I hope is dangerous to the people, because we're doing it out of respect, out of love, and out of an appreciation that people want to do something, but they don't know what to do because they haven't been taught or told what's going on. So how do you fight something that's unknown? We want to take that unknown out of it.
Yeah. Sony brought up that on hers it says mother and father. I should clarify, when I was speaking of the informant, it's on the original piece of paper that your parents filled out.
The one in the hospital. That's the one you refer to, is it?
That's the one I'm referring to. It may not necessarily be the one that they have in their hands at this time. But I'm curious. The military tends not to hide stuff quite as well, so I was curious if the military birth certificate would still have some of that information on there. So, all right. Yeah, so that was quite the rabbit hole.
But that's awesome, because it's getting. We've got lots of people gaining up in the room now. We've got people who are listening. It's animated. It's informative.
Yep.
And it's what we want to do.
Most definitely.
We want this information to get out, and we want more and more people to understand it, comprehend it, whichever word you want to use. And it's going to get boring potentially, because we're going to have to repeat this. We're going to repeat the information that we were talking about in show 1 and 2. Technically, we're repeating it maybe in a different way, but that's the only way you guys can comprehend what we've spent the last 10 to 15 years doing ourselves. You're not going to get this in a month. You're not going to get this in 6 months.
Yeah.
But because of what we've already done in advance, and hopefully in the way that we're trying to bring this information across to you in such a way that it's hopefully, I think, easier for you to grasp, then you will get it a hell of a lot faster than we did.
Oh, most definitely. I just wanted to, we got like 15 minutes left. I just wanted to open up the room. Is anybody out there want to bring something up, want to make a suggestion for next week, ask a question, complain, tell us we're offline, whatever, anything?
Oh, Danny's just brought up that question. I sent her a little text message.
Hello, John.
Video.
Hi, Danny.
Hey, how you doing, Danny?
Peachy keen.
Wonderful. Yes, I sent you a quick message. I don't know if you saw it, John. That Harvey Dent video, it's basically how to monetize your secret account. And it's US based.
Yeah, I do think he's onto something. This came up years ago. We didn't have enough information at that time, but I think some more information has come out lately. But I do think there's a lot more to it than what this fella's suggesting, because if you imagine the trouble you're in if you try to access a bank account that you don't have actual signing authority on, you can cause yourself a lot of problems. It may go through, the bills may get paid. 5 years down the road, they come with guns and say you're committing fraud and you've accessed bank accounts for hundreds of thousands of dollars that you don't actually have access to, and we want it all back. So I'm disinclined to travel that route at this time because I just don't have enough information on it. Anybody who's interested in it?
I do know that people have gone to prison for this stuff, so
that's right.
Not something that I would openly advise people to do.
Yeah, for anybody that's interested in looking at this, it's a fella named Harvey Dent, like the Batman Harvey Dent. Look him up on YouTube. He's got a bunch of videos on there. He gives you process and procedure, but he doesn't give you comprehension, which is sorely lacking. And again, like we've warned people a number of times, if you try a cookie cutter method, you're going to wind up with egg on your face. Please comprehend what you're doing. Know it as best as you possibly can so that when something does jump out of the woodwork, you're able to deal with it.
Yeah, I have a comment that I don't think most people seem to get. The money system, the currency that we are using, excuse me, it isn't ours. It's private. It belongs to the Federal Reserve. It belongs to the government of Canada, because I don't think the Bank of Canada is something different. That's still a public enterprise. So the currency being used in Canada, I don't think
the currency
is government.
Private.
It's not Bank of Canada.
The currency is private, yes, but it is supposed to represent your share in the wealth of the country.
Yes, but don't forget what's happened is that because the central banks are now have initiated or intervened within this little process between us, the people, and the government of Canada, they've now got a charter or a contract that they will try and maintain the interest and maintain the money supply and the money system in a private contract between the government and themselves. We are not a party to that in any shape or form. So any time that we start making a grab for accounts and for money that we say is ours, we are instantly going to open ourselves up to a world of hurt, because it can be shown right across the board that it does not belong to us.
That's right. Clive brought up
we are just allowed to use it.
Clive brought up a really good point, which is the other side of this. Instead of accessing it yourself, you assign a fiduciary, and that is using the set-off and discharge process, where where if someone owes you money and they want your services, or you want their services, you can just set off a portion of the debt, which is totally legit. It's really easy to do. The discharge and set-off process is actually way easier than trying to actually access that bank account, and it doesn't get you into trouble, because you're assigning a fiduciary who's supposed to know what he's doing to actually do the work. So if he screws up, he's the one responsible for it.
Yeah, and that's all part of the Bills of Exchange Act that we've talked about. The Bills of Exchange Act is literally what we are supposed to operate under as a bankrupt nation. So, as was just pointed out, we don't pay for anything. You can't pay for anything under bankruptcy. You can only discharge the debt that you've accrued against whatever accounting system they're using. But we're not using that. That's really not what's happening. What's being forced upon us is a transfer of wealth and a transfer of our productive energy for the benefit of the people who control this system, as opposed to us who are the producers and working in this system.
Mia brought up Judy Jandora's stuff, and apparently, if any of you folks are familiar with the old Lisa and Danny shows with Bob Wright and Brian, apparently Bob and Judy are now working with Heather. Don't know. Judy is actually, she strikes me as a level-headed, fairly decent human being. I'd be interested in talking to her and seeing if I can get some poop on what's actually going on over there, because I haven't been following Heather's stuff since she dropped the ball, 5 years ago?
All I have to say is, what the fuck?
And you do it so well, Danny.
No, because if it was video, you'd see the look on my face right now.
Yeah, I can imagine it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of
we'll have to go there at some point, John.
Oh, I'm certainly certainly. A lot of this stuff has come out in the past, and we knew at that time, at least the people who were careful with what they were researching knew at that time, that we didn't have the whole picture. Now we have a little more of the picture. I still think we don't have the whole picture. So if you're going to enter into the arena of trying to claim your bond, claim your money, claim this vast quantity of wealth that is supposed to sit there, which I do believe exists, be very, very, very careful, because this is something that can get you into a tremendous amount of trouble. This is why I brought up the setup and discharge, because that is a much simpler process. It carries a hell of a lot less liability if you make a mistake. And pretty much guaranteed, it doesn't matter how good you are at this stuff, unless you live it and do it for a living all day long, you're going to make a mistake. So assume that you're going to screw up. Take the path that's going to cause you the least amount of grief. Please.
Well, typically the utility companies are acting, or supposedly acting, as our fiduciaries, which is why they send remittance slips with their statements of account. We are technically supposed to fill that in the correct manner and return it to them.
Force that off and discharge.
It says return it. Yeah. I mean, whichever way we're supposed to action that remittance slip. The problem is that we don't know the verbiage that we're supposed to use on that. And we assume that we're supposed to send a check. It doesn't say that. It says send it with payment. Our payment could just be something as simple as a piece of text and our signature.
Yeah,
exactly. That can be payment. That's our authorization as the agent of the straw man. I hate to use that, but that's how a lot of people kind of know it.
Yep,
but that's as simple as it could be or should be.
There is a growing movement. It's just getting started right now, with the intent of forcing the people who are in government, who are good people, who are honest and honorable people, to actually release this information. To let people know, yes, this is valid. Here's the procedure. This is what you do. And it's just starting now. It's just getting going. I'm sure it's going to become pretty widespread over the next few months. So keep an eye out for that. I would suggest that read through the information that's presented. Use your own discernment. If it feels right to you, if it feels valid to you, then by all means jump on board, because government is not necessarily a bad thing. It's nice to have the services. It's nice to have the fire department and the police department and ambulance services and hospitals, provided they are operated correctly. And right now they're not, because we, the people, are not taking responsibility for our public resources. We need to maintain control of this. As soon as we let go of control, somebody is going to step in and profit from it, and everybody else is going to lose. So if there's anything you can do to seize back your power, even in the slightest, smallest way, that's a start. Ask questions. Don't allow assumptions through. Don't believe that the language they're using is actually English. And even though I say don't allow assumptions, make the assumption that the language they're speaking is not English and you don't know what they're talking about. That's a safe assumption. And it's probably one that's going to serve you very, very well, provided you ask the right questions. Now, asking the right questions, it does take some practice. So think about it, ponder it, practice. If you've got people in your neighborhood, if you've got neighbors that are curious about this stuff, get together every once a week or once every 2 weeks, or however often you can pull it off. Discuss this. Go over the questions. Think about how you want to phrase these things so that they are clear, concise, they cannot be misinterpreted, and they are the questions such that if they are answered, they expose everything. They expose the system. It's just like what we were talking about at the beginning of the show when the judge says, do you accept charges? Well, which you are you talking about? Because we know now that in law, you is plural. It refers to a group. So make them expose this. Don't accept their opinion as gospel, as law. Have them justify it. And the more questions we ask, the more people we have asking these questions, the faster and the more power we're going to all obtain.
Yeah,
Okay,
now, actually, just as an addition to that as well, John, as an example, understanding that these people in the higher echelons of government, they know what's happening. A few years ago, when I actually went to open a bank account without a social insurance number and without using identification, I was told, can't do it, doesn't happen. I politely informed the assistant manager of the bank that, I'm sorry, if you check with your legal department, I think you'll find that I am correct and you are incorrect, and I will be back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to fill out all the necessary forms. To which I did. She had the application on the desk in front of me and then said, it would appear that you are correct. And thinking about it, I put two and two together because I happen to know that there was a government minister who retired, whom I know, and he has told me that, and I've witnessed that he has returned all of his identification, all of his government ID. Once he retired from the job, he returned everything back to the necessary departments. Yep. And she told me that, having known this particular minister for quite some time, but she didn't understand and didn't realize what it all meant until I started talking to her and explaining the situation. Yep. And I have an account now with no social insurance number and no identification attached to it either.
Yep. Keep in mind, government is a social agreement. You are not obligated to be governed. And I think with that, I think we're going to call it a day. Anybody, if you got ideas, anything you want to discuss, put it in the chat. There's a whole group of people here now who are involved with this, so we should be moving along pretty nicely with some of this stuff. We'll get some questions in. Stick your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them next week if we can. If we can't answer them, we'll simply say we can't answer them and tell you why. If we're not sure, we'll tell you we're not sure, but we'll do the best we can for you. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Carl. The whole group. I'd list you all, but some of you probably want to stay anonymous.
I have my birth certificate sitting in front of me, guys. I just got it. So I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. Now, what was it that you were, I will definitely send you guys a picture of it. But you guys were saying something like, okay, so it says, this certificate certifies that my name was born to my parents, both my parents' name, in the place that I was born at the certain time on the blank of the day. You know, it's like my birthday's on the 10th.
Look for fine print. Look for fine print and look for limiting clauses.
At the bottom, the only thing that says at the bottom is that this official birth certificate for North Carolina is available from the Office of Vital Statistics. That's it. Okay. It has nothing on the back. It does have a stamped seal. You know, it says United States Navy on the top of it. But that's it.
Is there
on the back side?
There's no goofy number on the back, like a C and 6 digits, or an L and 6 digits, or looks like it's not supposed to be there. It's the wrong color. It's not. It's the wrong font size. Looks odd.
Nope. Nope. Nothing.
Very strange.
I'll definitely cover up that stuff for you, and I'll show it to you. But I was born in the 70s, so I don't know if that makes a difference. You know, I don't know. It has like attending physicians, the commanding officer. They not only is the names typed in, but then they also sign it. There's nothing on the back side of the document. You could just see the raised seal. That's it.
Okay.
So I will definitely. I mean, it does have something that's down in the left-hand corner that has like, in the same print, it has like numbers. It says like, it doesn't matter what it says. Should I give up that information? I don't know.
I'll have a look at it and see if it's going to be critical and because it's military, it's probably under a completely different set of rules, which is why I was really curious about it. So
yeah,
sanitize it, wipe out anything that nobody should actually know, because all we're really interested in is the form, not your information specifically.
Yeah. I'm trying to get that done right now.
All right.
little pieces of paper.
Well,
Yeah.
no worries. No rush.
I'll drop it in chat.
No rush.
Okay,
We can wait.
Thank you for that, Burma, and appreciate everybody joining us. And I'll be around, I think, for a little while if anybody wants a post-host or post-show chat, I should say. And, you know, a lot more people can come in voice. It won't be recorded. The end of the show, we stop the recording, and then everything after that is just between ourselves. So again, I want to thank John for co-hosting and producing. As always, great job. I loved this weekend's show. I know we kind of focused a little bit on the language and went a little bit around the houses, but I think it was good for everybody, and I think people learned something that maybe they didn't know before. And we just want more people to become involved in this. So yeah, hopefully you'll be with us next week. And love you all. Thanks for the show.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.